Gary Burghoff was really hard not to like. He played Radar O'Reilly, the sweet and loyal company clerk on the TV show MASH. He became the heart of the show and one of the most loved characters on TV ever. His mix of being innocent and quietly strong made people watching at home feel like they really knew him. But behind all the laughs and praise, something darker was going on. Not every actor on the show liked the man who played Radar. One of them started to hate him so much that it made working together really bad. What really happened between Gary Burghoff and the other actors would only come out years later, and the truth is sadder than fans ever thought it would be. When MASH first started on TV on September 17, 1972, nobody could have guessed it would become one of the most famous shows in American TV history. The show was made from Richard Hooker's book from 1968 and a movie from 1970, directed by Robert Altman. The show caught people's attention because it was really good at mixing funny parts with really sad parts. Among all the quirky surgeons, smart-mouthed doctors, and weird supporting characters, Radar O'Reilly stood out. Gary Burghoff had already played Radar in the movie version, and when the TV series started, he was the only main actor who stayed from the movie. That helped keep the show steady, but it also put a lot of pressure on him. Radar wasn't just there to make people laugh. He was like the emotional glue of the 4077th Army Unit. He was the innocent young soldier who somehow always knew what his bosses needed before they even asked for it. The teddy bear he carried around became a symbol of how young and vulnerable he was in the middle of all the bad stuff that happens in war. People watching at home fell in love with him right away. Letters came pouring into CBS praising how Burghoff played the character. Critics said Radar was the soul of MASH, the good guy who helped balance out a show that was full of jokes about how bad things can be. It looked like Burghoff had everything an actor could want: fame, steady work, and a character that would be remembered in TV history forever. But all the attention and love he got from viewers didn't always mean things were good behind the camera. Some of the other actors liked Gary's talent, but found it hard to work with him. He was shy, quiet, and often stayed by himself on set. Unlike Alan Alda, who loved working with others and quickly became the unofficial leader of the show, Burghoff had trouble dealing with all the TV business politics. Being alone like that, plus being very sensitive, made him an easy target when people got frustrated. By the mid-1970s, whispers about fights had already started spreading among the people making the show. For fans watching at home, Radar was perfect, loyal, kind, and impossible to replace. But for at least one co-star, working with Burghoff was anything but easy. Their dislike started quietly with small arguments and tense moments. Over time, though, the anger got harder and turned into something you couldn't ignore. And one shocking moment would prove just how deep that hate really was. While MASH looked like a perfect team from the outside, the truth behind the cameras was way more complicated. For Gary Burghoff, the success of Radar O'Reilly quickly became like a sword that cuts both ways, good and bad, at the same time. The more people watching at home loved him, the more pressure he felt to live up to a version of himself that wasn't real. In interviews years later, he said that Radar was a better person than I'll ever be, and that trying to act like the character's innocent personality week after week left him totally worn out. Unlike Alan Alda or Wayne Rogers, whose characters had flaws and could do darker, funnier things, Radar was written as pure and always the same. That meant Burghoff had very little room to grow as an actor, but people still expected him to be perfect every time he showed up on screen. The people making the show leaned into how popular Radar was, putting him at the emotional center of important episodes, which only made it harder for Burghoff to deliver. Off-screen, the pressure got even worse because of the really tough filming schedule. MASH was filmed on location at a ranch in Malibu, often under really hard conditions with long hours and high expectations. For Burghoff, who was married and raising a young daughter at the time, the workload became almost impossible to handle. In an honest interview with Good Morning America in the 1980s, he admitted, "I was giving my all on set, but I didn't have anything left for the people I cared about most." These struggles didn't stay hidden from the other actors. Some felt sorry for him, but others saw his tiredness as being stuck up, or even thinking he was better than everyone else. Crew members remembered that he often stayed in his trailer, avoiding the friendships that brought most of the cast together. He rarely went to wrap parties or dinners, and when he did go, he was very quiet. That distance started to cause misunderstandings. It wasn't long before tensions exploded. Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John, once got so angry during a fight with Burghoff that he reportedly threw a chair across the set. McLean Stevenson, who played Colonel Blake, described his own relationship with Burghoff as love-hate, admitting that they often clashed even while respecting each other's work. These fights cracked the illusion of MASH being a perfect family. And for one cast member especially, frustration hardened into straight-up hatred toward the man behind Radar. As the seasons went on, tensions around Gary Burghoff became harder to ignore. While his character stayed as the example of innocence, behind the camera, he found himself stuck in increasingly bitter fights. The most famous of these involved Wayne Rogers, whose easygoing Trapper John was loved by fans. According to Raymond Straight's 1983 biography of Alan Alda, one heated argument between Rogers and Burghoff got so intense that Rogers snapped, picked up a chair, and threw it across the set in Burghoff's direction. Though no one got seriously hurt, the incident showed the growing anger that was bubbling under the polished surface of MASH. McLean Stevenson, known for his friendly Colonel Blake, later admitted that his interactions with Burghoff were far from smooth. In his words, it was a love-hate relationship. He respected Burghoff's talent, but their personalities often clashed, leading to friction that made working together uncomfortable. Stevenson was honest in saying that, "Sometimes I was a problem for him, and sometimes he was a problem for me," suggesting that while the conflict wasn't constant, it was unavoidable. The most difficult relationship, however, was with Alan Alda. As Hawkeye Pierce, Alda wasn't just the star of the series. He gradually became its creative center, co-writing and directing dozens of episodes. Burghoff, meanwhile, often felt overlooked. His role as Radar was loved by viewers, but undervalued by the people running the production. Over time, that imbalance fueled a quiet war of egos. Burghoff resented what he saw as Alda's dominance, while Alda grew frustrated with what he saw as Burghoff's moodiness and unwillingness to fully fit in with the cast. By season 7, the tension reached a breaking point. Burghoff's exhaustion, coupled with his troubled relationships, left him increasingly isolated. The official explanation for his leaving was that he wanted to spend more time with his family, but insiders have long suggested that the truth was far messier. Loretta Swit, who played Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, later thought back, "Nobody wanted him to leave, but we all understood why." The weight of constant conflict, both personal and professional, had simply become unbearable. Radar's farewell would become one of the most emotional storylines in MASH history. But for Burghoff, it was more than just a character's exit. It was an escape from an environment that had grown toxic. When Gary Burghoff finally made the decision to leave MASH, the producers knew his exit couldn't be handled carelessly. Radar O'Reilly was too important, too beloved to simply disappear. His departure had to hit home not only with the audience, but also with the cast and crew, who had relied on his steady presence for 7 seasons. The result was a 2-part storyline, in Season 8 titled Goodbye Radar. In these episodes, Radar gets word that his uncle has died, leaving his family farm without anyone to run it. Torn between his sense of duty to the 4077th and his responsibility at home, Radar ultimately chooses to leave the unit and return to Iowa. It was a fitting parallel to Burghoff's own life, stepping away from the demands of the show in order to be more present for his family. On screen, Radar's exit was heartbreaking. The character who had represented innocence and hope was suddenly gone, leaving a hole that could never be filled. His farewell showed how much he had grown since the early seasons. No longer just the naive clerk, but a man who could make a difficult, selfless choice. For viewers, it felt like saying goodbye to the heart of MASH. Behind the scenes, emotions were just as raw. Cast members later remembered how difficult it was to film Burghoff's final scenes. Jamie Farr, who played Klinger, remembered the sad mood on set. No one wanted Gary to leave, but we all understood it. That made it even harder. Loretta Swit compared his absence to losing a limb because of how deeply Radar had been woven into the fabric of the show. For Burghoff himself, those final moments were bittersweet. He worked closely with the writers to make sure Radar's farewell felt real, insisting that the character's innocence and goodness remain intact until the very end. It was a rare instance where the script mirrored real life so perfectly. Radar, leaving to care for his family just as Burghoff was doing off-screen. But once the cameras stopped rolling, there was no Hollywood ending. While the audience cried for Radar's departure, Burghoff was walking away from not only a role, but from years of tension and silent battles that had left scars invisible to fans. Leaving MASH was supposed to give Gary Burghoff the balance and peace he had long wanted. He had told himself that stepping away would allow him to be a better husband and father, and in many ways it did. But the change was far from simple. For an actor who had spent nearly 10 years playing one of television's most famous characters, there was no easy way to step out of Radar's shadow. In the years following his departure, Burghoff's career took a quieter path. He played Radar again briefly in the short-lived spin-off After MASH in 1983, and again in the TV movie Walter the following year, which followed Radar's life after the war. Neither project succeeded, and both were quickly forgotten. For audiences, MASH had been lightning in a bottle, and attempts to extend the universe without the same group fell flat. Rather than chase Hollywood roles, Burghoff turned inward. He began painting wildlife, a passion that gave him comfort away from the pressures of show business. His artwork gained recognition in galleries, and collectors admired his ability to capture animals with the same sensitivity he once gave to Radar. In interviews, he admitted that this creative outlet helped him find peace. "It wasn't about fame for me. It never was. I had to make a choice that allowed me to be the kind of father and husband I wanted to be." But the scars from his time on MASH lingered. Former colleagues remembered him as quiet, even withdrawn in later years. And while fans continued to love Radar, Burghoff himself had complicated feelings about the character. For a long time, he admitted the association felt suffocating. "Audiences think you have to be the person they see on screen," he thought back. "The truth is, Radar was a better person than I'll ever be." That disconnect between public love and personal reality weighed heavily on him. Over time, though, Burghoff made peace with Radar. He came to understand that the innocence and kindness the character represented offered comfort to millions, even if it had cost him dearly behind the scenes. And while he never reached the same career heights again, he embraced a quieter life, one defined not by Hollywood, but by family, art, and hard-won self-acceptance. Looking back, Gary Burghoff's story isn't just about one man leaving a hit television series. It's about the hidden costs of fame, the toll of carrying a character who became larger than life, and the human conflicts that audiences never saw. For millions of viewers, MASH was the perfect blend of humor and heart, a series where the cast looked inseparable, but Burghoff's experiences shattered that myth. The reality was that behind the laughter and friendship were real tensions, hurt egos, exhausting hours, and quiet anger that no amount of clever writing could erase. Wayne Rogers losing his temper, McLean Stevenson admitting to a love-hate relationship, and the cold distance between Burghoff and Alan Alda painted a very different picture of the show's so-called family. For Burghoff, these conflicts left him with scars that lasted long after his final episode aired. His decision to step away wasn't just about family, as the official story suggested. It was also about survival. The environment had become toxic, and staying would have meant giving up his mental health and well-being. In one interview years later, he admitted plainly, "Leaving MASH saved my soul." The legacy of his departure also reveals something bigger about fame itself. Audiences often project perfection onto their favorite shows, imagining harmony where there may be division, and lifelong friendships where there might only be professionalism. Burghoff's story shows how difficult it can be for actors to live inside those illusions. Fans saw Radar as pure, loyal, and endlessly kind. But the man behind him was struggling under huge pressure, both from the role and from his relationships on set. And yet, despite the bitterness, there is no denying the impact Gary Burghoff left behind. Radar O'Reilly remains one of the most beloved characters in television history. A symbol of innocence in the middle of war. A reminder that even in chaos, kindness matters. Burghoff may have walked away from MASH, but he also preserved himself, and in doing so ensured that Radar's legacy would remain untouched. Gary Burghoff's story reminds us that even the brightest smiles on screen can hide the darkest struggles off it. His time on MASH was marked by love from fans and tension with colleagues, a bittersweet legacy that shaped his decision to walk away. Decades later, his honesty allows us to see the show not just as a cultural phenomenon, but as a workplace, with real people, real pain, and real consequences. What about you? Do you think Gary made the right choice by leaving at the height of MASH success? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into Hollywood's untold stories.